when we're computing some classical probabilities, then we talk about, we let E be an event. Okay. So an event does not have to be something grand. The event could be that I flip a coin one time. The event could be that I roll a pair of dice on the table. The event could be that I choose a card out of the deck and then I flip a coin. Okay, so an event is just something that happens. When I want to talk about the probability that the event occurs, the way that we compute that probability is we take the number of ways our event can happen over the total number of possible outcomes. So S stands for our sample space, E is our event. Okay, N of E, it's kind of like function notation, but it's really not as fancy as that. But how many ways E can happen over how many total possible outcomes that we have. When we give a probability, there are three ways that we can write it down. One is that we can leave it in fraction form. Of course, if we leave it as a fraction, we always want to leave our fractions in lowest terms. If I don't want to leave it in fraction form, then I can write it as a decimal. Or also, sometimes probabilities are expressed as percents. I would personally prefer that you talk fractions or decimals. Most of the time fractions, but because if you have something happen 1/3 of the time, calling it 0.3 or 0.33, that's really not close enough. 1/3 is more precise, and calling it 0.3 repeating, also difficult if we're doing more computations. So fraction form is great. If it's a nice decimal, like half the time or a fourth the time or an eighth the time, 0.125, we can write it. Or if the fractions are weird, 21 over 37, you can write that in decimal form unless you're asked to do otherwise. Just round it accordingly. Percents are things like the weather, or if we're talking about maybe statistics for athletics or that kind of thing. But most often fractions and decimals are what we'll use. Now realize that when we're talking about the probability of an event occurring, the absolutely positively, the biggest value that can attain is 1. Probabilities can never be bigger than 1. There cannot be a 120% chance that it's going to rain tomorrow, or the probability that you'll roll a 5 being 1.7. Also, the absolute lowest probability could be is 0. But it can sorry, couldn't get to the pause button fast enough. Okay, it is possibility for the probability of an event to be equal to 0. This means it can never happen. Okay, it's completely impossible. And the probability being 1 means it's guaranteed. Guaranteed. Pretend that says guaranteed in a way that you can read it. Okay. Oftentimes, the probability is somewhere in between. One other thing that is mentioned here, and I'll get it squeezed on this page, and then we'll actually do some computing. If we want to talk about the complement of an event, the way we write that down is E bar. The complement means the event is kind of like the opposite. Back when I took my prob and stats class, we used to call it not E. Okay, so you have E and you have not E. Now, E bar is what they use in our book. There are some times that you'll see E prime used for the complement. In our college algebra text, we talk about the complement with a prime, here a little hash, instead of the bar. Okay, again, go with our book's convention when we're doing that, but just understand if you're reading another text, it might have your complement being there. So if E is the event that when I flip a coin, I flip heads. Okay. The complement of E would be not E, not flipping a head. So I guess if I said equals before, I'll say equals here, which would be flip tails. If my event, when I roll a die, is that I roll a 2, the complement of that event is that I roll anything that's not a 2. So it would be 1, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Okay, it's the rest of the story. Either E happens or something else happens. And so not E or E complement is going to be the rest of the sample space. And that would be the complement. I'm going to go ahead and keep this short, and I'm going to put the examples in the next one because I get long-winded sometimes there. Okay. So we'll be ready to actually do some of this in the next video.